You're listening to Packers Talk Network.
Packers Talk.
Welcome to the Packers Weekly Podcast, part of PackersTalk.com network. I'm your host, Miles Teddick, joined by your co-host, Tim Hamilton. We are diehard Packers fans. We just love talking about the Pack. We're not getting into all the national sports media talking points and nonsense and all that stuff going on out there. We're diving into the top topics around the Pack every week, breaking down games during the season, and sorting through all the drama and the rumors of the offseason. Of course, the draft stuff as well. If y'all want to support the podcast, please spike that like button for us. We give us a follow on all the socials, and most importantly, subscribe to that Packers Talk YouTube channel. Head on over there right now. You can pause us. You won't miss anything in the next 30 seconds. Packers Talk YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the little bell next to it. We love you. Thank you guys so much for listening, hanging out, and subscribing. Tonight, we got some free agency stuff to get into. This is going to be fun. Borderline breaking news. Maybe some of y'all haven't heard what's going on yet. Maybe. Couple free agency ads to talk about for sure. Definitely missed out on a bunch of guys that we all talked about, and that usually happens more than getting the guys that we talk about. And then, of course, we're going to get into some draft prospect talk with the QBs, the running backs. We're kind of starting with some positions that may not be as high of interest to the Packers this time around, but we're going to touch on all these positions. We're going to get into at least some of these guys that look like they might be in the green and gold, maybe from day 3, stuff like that. But first, we need a word from our sponsor, and I do apologize because this is the old ad read. Sorry, guys, but I don't know where the new one is. I'll get back to it next week. Forgive me, but we're at least doing it. Wisconsin's own Ticket King. For over 30 years, Ticket King has been providing Packers tickets to Packers fans. You can find them on the web at theticketking.com or visit their locations in Green Bay and Milwaukee. For direct links to specific Packers tickets, go to packerstalk.com/tickets or browse their website at theticketking.com. Business taken care of. Tim, how are we doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Happy first day of legal tampering.
Yes, happy day. It's like it
not
is
official,
kind of a Christmassy kind of vibe for football fans, or for the football nerds at least, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's this stupid, 2 days of you can't sign a contract, but you can talk about, and everybody's already agreed to a contract. So by the time Wednesday rolls around, they can actually agree to terms. It's all done. Like free agency's done by then, pretty much. So. But it's cool. It's been an interesting day for the Packers and for Packer fans. And we end up with a couple players so far. And I think, there's going to be more to come. We'll see who that's going to be. Not much out there in free agency, but I think they still got some moves to make. Maybe a big one. Who knows? But
I think there's still moves on the table. Yeah.
I think there's some moves still. I don't know if it's Trey Hendrickson. That would be amazing. That would be the best move they could make at this point.
That's got to be like the top of the list move right now, right?
That's a complete game changer for them if they could do that. I don't expect.
And it's realistic.
Maybe. I mean,
as I say that, as you're saying, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it is realistic, though. I think the compensation they're looking for is realistic, and the Packers, whether they want to or not, seem to have room to bring on one of those $30 million a year type guys. A lot of people really wanted it to be DK. I think we could all sit here now and go hindsight 2020. It was never going to be DK.
Yeah.
Gute gave us signs of that too. He kind of gave us some hints that, he's not going to pay a receiver like that, but they have the room. They have the ability. Is their desire, like you don't think it's going to happen, but I mean, convince me why not?
I just don't think it's something the Packers usually do. 31-year-old defensive end edge rusher who's going to take multiple draft picks to trade, and then you're going to have to pay him. And we just saw Max Crosby and Myles Garrett get massive extensions from their teams, and maybe he doesn't get as high as Crosby. I think Crosby got $35.5 million. Maybe he doesn't hit that, but he's going to hit $30 million plus.
Yeah.
And you're going to be giving up multiple picks to acquire him, whether those picks are this year or a combination of this year and 2026. I don't think so, but I will say, like, I've seen Washington mentioned as one of the teams that could trade for him. They made a big trade today to get Laramie Tunsil. They've given up draft picks for him. They gave up draft picks during the season for Lattimore, so I would assume that kind of takes him out of the running. But there's got to be a bunch of other teams that would be interested in getting somebody as productive as Trey Hendrickson's been for the last 4 years. He's a stud. I mean, he's
17 sacks 2 seasons in a row now. Is that what I saw?
yeah. I mean, he's an and I think he had like 80 pressures or something like that. He's an absolute game changer for their defense.
That's one of those that maybe is an exception to some of this, right?
Maybe it is. It could be. And the fact that like we're in the free agency or the legal tampering period as we talk here on Monday night, the best options for him at our edge rusher are all gone. Like there's nothing left. It was a very shallow pool of edge rushers anyway in free agency, and it's gone. So it's kind of either Trey Hendrickson or wait to the draft. So, I mean, I don't expect it to happen. I don't think it's impossible, but I think the chances are very, very slim. They still can do it cap-wise, even with the 2 signings today of Nate Hobbs and Aaron Banks. They still have the cap space where they could bring them in, pay them, and be okay under the cap. They're okay.
Right.
But yeah, I don't see it happening. I would love for it to happen. I would love to totally be wrong. We would have an awesome time talking about it next week, but no, I don't see it being realistic for them. But that's the big one. That would be the game changer for their team and their defense.
We got a friend here, Chris, the casual in. Look at this. Hobbs signing is odd. Another slot ? So Bull to the bench. So I don't think it's that simple, and I don't think that the Packers. I mean, they've kind of shown this. They don't typically bring guys in just for the face value of what they offer. You know, they're always looking for versatility, and I think with a guy like this, you know, he's 25, about to be 26 years old. Relatively young, but got some good experience under his belt. Obviously, you know, had some days with Bisaccia there, and he mentioned that, you know, those were pretty special days to him. So, you know, I think they have an idea of what they're getting in the guy and what they can do with him. Just because he was something in another system doesn't necessarily mean he'll be that in that same thing in Hafley's system. So, yeah, you know, I think it's never bad to have multiple options for the slot, as we've seen with injuries, what happens. I also think that Bullard, I don't think we need to be down on him just because he may not be headed for a starting slot position. I think they're really high on him. I think they're up on him. And I think that they're just looking for him to really probably be able to play any of those positions where he's needed. I wouldn't put it past him to be able to do that. You know, if you need him at corner, play him at corner. You need him at slot, play him at slot. You need him at safety, play him at safety. If he can do that effectively, he might be one of the most valuable players on the defense. You know, so
yeah, and Hobbs was, you know, yes, he was recently primarily a slot cornerback with the Raiders, and a pretty good one at that.
Yeah,
but he's got the size and the athletic ability to play outside, which he's done at times. He was an outside cornerback all throughout college. I don't, and you know, there was an initial report. Ryan Wood of the Press Gazette said that his source had told him that their plan is to play Hobbs outside and leave Bullard in the slot. Now that could change. We'll see how it works out. I don't think they're sending Bullard to the bench. He's a 2nd-round pick who they just took last year, and yeah, he definitely did struggle at times, but he also showed a lot of promise as well. And I don't think they're necessarily already casting him aside. I mean, because Hobbs is coming in, he's going to play. He's going to play a lot. He's going to be a starter. Like, so if he's taking over the slot, you're not sitting Bullard. Like, I don't see it. I think they're going to try Hobbs outside and see what works. I think it gives them a lot of versatility because now you have Bullard.
absolutely.
You have Bullard that can play the slot, can play safety. You have Nixon who can play outside and can play the slot. And now you have Hobbs that can play outside and play the slot. So it gives you versatility. And we saw them last year when they had some injuries in the secondary, when Bullard went down, Evan Williams was out. Things didn't go really well. Like guys had to adjust and play different positions that they hadn't practiced or that they weren't running in games, and it didn't go well. So now you have guys with more versatility. So I think it gives them some options. I think it also gives them potentially some options to maybe play 3 safeties at times. You know, They didn't get to that last year, but maybe we see Williams, McKinney, and Bullard all in the field. And we see Hobbs out there as well. So yeah, I don't think Bullard's going to the bench. I think he's going to get plenty of playing time, and it'll be interesting how they do configure the cornerback room, because it is, Hobbs has been primarily a slot guy, but so it's going to be a little bit of a projection for them if they try him outside. Like, can he fit and can he hold up outside?
Yeah, and I just like this. I like the approach that they're taking. And when I was looking through, and we were a couple weeks ago, I think we were going to try to get a little bit of a free agency episode, and we just got too busy talking about this draft class. But Nate Hobbs was one that stuck out to me, just fit the mold, right? And I know everybody loves DJ Reed. He's a little small, right? He's a little smaller than what Gute typically goes for. So you could kind of do that with everybody, Charvarius Ward, he fits the mold, but he was more top of market. I looked at Nate Hobbs and it made a lot of sense. Bisaccia being there, and you don't know if that's a meaningful connection or not. And it turns out it is. So yeah, that one made a lot of sense to me. And he, again, he's 25 years old. He's young. They have an idea of what they believe he can be and what they, how they're going to use him. But most of all, it gives them flexibility, which they have been painfully aware that they need because of injuries over the last few seasons, whether it's O-line or secondary. So yeah, I mean, this I think is a move that makes a lot of sense. It gives them a lot of flexibility, and I'll go as far as to say this, even though I am not on this side of the argument, that this probably increases the probability of them moving Jair Alexander at some point. The folks that were like, oh, we didn't add anybody, so what do we cut Jair Alexander down? It's just like, you don't get rid of a body when you need bodies, right? Like you hope that the body is healthy and you can use them, right? Unless you just can't pay him, which they said they can. So no, you don't just cut him because you're mad at him. At this point, I think Nate Hobbs brings a veteran presence, fills a gap that gives you the flexibility that if there is an issue there, or if there is a team out there willing to give you what you want for Jair Alexander, it's a much easier prospect to handle, because then you're not left with a singular, like, again, back to Nixon and Valentine, you're very shaky at it as a veteran presence in your receiver or your cornerback room. So like that I think helps that a lot, especially a Bisaccia guy. But yes, Chris, with the casual end, man, I am 100% team keep Jair. Keep this man. You hope that he's healthy. If he is cornerback number one. And you have then 3 veteran capable cornerbacks on your roster. That is such a better situation than getting rid of Jair Alexander and not having that many veteran bodies. And I mean, I'm not even calculating Valentine into this.
Don't forget about Valentine.
Can't forget about Valentine. So now all of a sudden you've got a nice deep room where if you're going to have to endure at least one injury to somebody. That happens. It's just statistically at this point what's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I think that best case scenario to me is you keep Ja, he's healthy, and we're back on track, and everybody, starts to like kick that on the road. I didn't say that. I didn't say we should get rid of him. We can just tuck all those comments back, and that's fine. I'll let that happen. But I think I would love to see him stay. I know you're on the other side, so I gotta give you your rebuttal, man.
No. We've gone through. We've talked about it. I think they're moving on. I would be shocked if he's back, and I guess this kind of adds to it, but not really, because whether they add a corner right away or not, I think they were moving on. So I don't think it really changes anything. I'm not at all surprised that they signed a corner. I kind of expected a corner would be added. I didn't have Nate Hobbs though, and you did, credit to you. But
I mean, it's not. I wasn't calling a shot, but it
right.
It made
he was
sense.
One of the guys that made sense, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I figured they would add a corner. They did. It's an interesting fit as far as, he's primarily slot. Is he going to be an outside guy? That's what it seems like he's going to be. So I think that's the risk is, can he fit where they want him to be? But other than that, he's got the size, he's got the athletic ability, he's young, and that's what they like. He's coming off his first contract. He's still in the prime of his career. That's where they primarily focus when they go out and spend on free agents. And it makes sense. That's the guys you want. You don't want them heading down over the hill like a lot of these other guys are.
Right.
So, yeah, so he fits that, and he's got the versatility, and I think it allows Hafley with his system to be really interchangeable with how he uses guys. And when injuries do strike, and that they're going to, you have guys that are capable of filling different roles that have played those roles before, so it's not going to be, a shock to the system for them. And it even allows you to be game plan specific each week, like how you mix and match your secondary, which will be a really cool potential feature if they're
I
able to
think
get.
that's more important to them than maybe the fans and the media are even able to know,
Yeah, and that can be, it's great if you have Patrick Surtain and you can just put him out at cornerback every week and, forget about it. But
Right.
those guys are really hard to come by, and you better draft them and you better pay them a ton of money and keep them healthy, right? Jair couldn't stay healthy. But if you don't have that and you have versatility where you can go out there and be, like I said, game plan specific, matchup specific, it allows you to do a lot of different things. And it really, you can kind of, set your defense where you're unpredictable as far as what you're going to do. And offenses don't like that. That's tough for game planning purposes. So yeah, I think they have a lot more versatility. From the clips I've seen of him, I'm not real familiar with Hobbs, but from the clips I've seen him, he's an aggressive tackler. He comes up and tackles. He's physical. He's got pretty good length, and he's got good size. He's not huge. I think he's about 6 foot, but that's decent size and really good athletic abilities around the ball. So I like it. It's an interesting fit, but I do like it, and it makes sense. And I don't think it stops them at all from taking another corner in a draft, and even one that would be there, fairly early. I mean, I don't expect a first round corner unless somebody just happens to fall into their lap that they really like. But second day, yeah, I don't think it stops them from doing that. But yeah, my initial impressions, I like it. My concern is just, how is he going to fit as an outside cornerback? Can he do that role?
Well, I will say we have some additional data now for another trend that we've talked about a lot, which is when Gute adds in free agency, he kind of tips his hand on what the priority is in the draft. So last year, you go off and you get a safety in Xavier McKinney. You drafted 3 safeties. You went off, you got Josh Jacobs. You drafted Marshawn Lloyd, excuse me.
Wish it was Lynch.
Yeah, gosh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so he's showing you like this is a priority. So let's, again, bring this back in and just, kind of analyze the pieces that are on the chessboard right now. You've got obviously Jair, they've said they'll listen to trades for him. You've got Malik Willis that has some value on the board right now. And then maybe even a Rasheed Walker. So when the draft comes around and the chips start falling and you end up in position, that another team, is really interested in moving up to for whatever reason. I was having some fun in the PFF mock draft thing, and Cam Ward actually fell to the Packers at 23 in some weird scenario, which made that pick super valuable in a trade. Yeah. Not that I think that that's something that could happen, but things like that could happen. I think if there's any likelihood of Jair or any other players like Malik Willis moving, it's probably in the draft when the sense of urgency is high and you have kind of situational urgency causing and kind of forcing decisions, right? Like, okay, well, we really want to go up and get that position. We want to be there. Okay, maybe we can move and get Jair, in as a part of that value, something like that. I think that's your most likely scenario. And if you get through the draft without more cornerbacks, which at this point, I don't know. I mean, signing a cornerback, it's like a surefire thing for Gute that he's going to spend a higher draft pick on a cornerback. So we'll see if that holds up. But if you come out without a cornerback, I think there's no way Jair's leaving. You need the bodies. But if you come out of this draft with a cornerback you like, it seems like now it's a numbers game and it makes sense to get rid of some bodies if you can get some good value in exchange. So that just things to think about as far as how these things can move from here. I don't know that I would expect to trade before the draft. I think that there's more leverage when you're in the draft. What do you think?
Yeah, possibly. I think it also could be something like once this initial wave of free agency dies down, that could be the time for a trade as well. Kind of see how things shake out. But yeah, I mean, it makes some sense when you're on the clock and you're seeing who's on the board, what draft picks you still have available to use in the trade. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I think that's where it ends up being more likely that something happens. Our friend R Showers jumping in. Hey, missed some. Sad to see TJ go. I believe in some beef on that D line versus our Swiss cheese run.
Swiss
Listen,
cheese. Their run
hey,
defense was really good last year.
I
They
hear
improved a
you
lot.
are. I hear you. I'm
Man,
not here to fight you on this, but eyes on the draft. Eyes on the draft. This draft class is loaded with the big boys that can stuff the run and get moving. I think that was the biggest thing that caused them to separate from TJ.
yeah.
Honestly, it's not that he's not good; it's that you have to pay him higher than you'd have to pay a rookie, and you're going to be able to replace that production with a rookie out of this draft class for sure.
Yeah, and I like TJ Slayton too. It would have been nice to keep him, but I understand what their thinking is that they could probably replace him with someone cheaper. And like you said, it's a deep defensive tackle class in the draft. So that's probably what they're thinking. Like they're definitely going to hit that in the draft. They might choose multiple defensive tackles in the draft. So they're a lot cheaper than paying TJ Slayton, the 2 years and 15 million he's getting from the Bengals, which good for him.
Yeah,
He's a
good for
nice
him. He
player.
earned it.
Yeah, he's a nice run player, and I agree they do need beef up front against the run. I wouldn't want to get any smaller, and they definitely need replacement defensive tackle, but I think they're going to do it the cheaper route, the younger route through the draft where there's a lot of guys. And I also think there's probably a good possibility Kenny Clark's playing more nose tackle next year than he did last season.
That wouldn't surprise me. I think that there's room for a lot of things to move around, especially with a new D-line coach and second year in Halfley's system. But again, the talent that's available in this draft, you got to see what you come out with, see what that skill set is, and how you can fit those pieces in with what you've got. I know a lot of people are down on some of the guys that are there, but you got to leave room for the context. There's still so much talent there, and first year in Halfley's system wasn't going to be perfect to everybody, right? And they certainly believed that there was an issue and maybe just a less than satisfactory performance from the D-line coach, and made that change. That happened pretty quickly, right? We didn't really even have to get there and make too much of a stink about it. It seems like the guy they got, he looks pretty good. So we got to give that group a chance to get what they can out of these guys. But remember, you've seen these guys play very good football. So let's not hit the panic button or the bust button or the out button too quick on these guys. That's just not fun, right? It's not fun to be pessimistic. There is a lot of reason to be optimistic about this group, and adding to it is the fun part. Like that's the real fun part. That's the part where if you can put a 330 guy who's moving on this defensive line, maybe two of them. Come on, we're gonna have some fun with that. This defense is gonna do well with that.
Yeah, so expect them to hit that in the draft.
Yeah. So I think that's a good thing. And here, to our next free agency signing. And hang on a second. We gotta give Tim his due here. Ours got a compliment. Tim is smart. All right. Clark needs to be comfortable. Obviously wasn't last year. Yes, exactly.
I agree with the second part. The first part, he's way off.
Come on, man. Stop it, Tim.
Nah. No. But Kenny Clark does need to be comfortable.
And I think that a lot of that has to do with coaching, right? And, coach's job is to put these guys in position to be successful, get the best out of them, highlight their strengths, minimize their weaknesses, things like that. If you're not doing that, you got to go. So we're going to find out what they can do with this. But, there's still a lot of talent there. There's no reason to be too down on this and think that if we can't get this, then we're toast or we're cooked and all that. You got to give room for the guys that are there to take another step forward, because I think a lot of them are going to. But yeah, and there's a lot of ball game left, a lot of offseason left here, a lot of moves left
Yes.
to be made here. I think
Free
Trey Hendrickson is definitely on the table. I
free
really,
agency's longer than just one day. Like
oh
it's
yeah,
so
oh
there's
yeah,
plenty of time. There's going to be guys probably that are cut loose as well.
yeah.
That become
We've seen
available.
a
That might
few of
be
those
interesting.
already.
So
We'll definitely see a few more.
yeah. So I think we're both in agreement. We both think the Nate Hobbs move was good, was smart,
Liked
and
it,
it'll be
liked
interesting.
it.
Yeah. Like that. I mean, it's not Xavier McKinney from last year where we're going crazy and we think it's, a home run. And obviously ended up being a home run, but we like it. It's a good move.
Very good depth move
Yeah. Yeah. And
with good upside.
yes. And I think this free agent class just overall for all players was pretty poor.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of guys that signed today that will be available again next year or the year after because they're getting cut loose. There were some really interesting moves. A lot of guys I'm sitting there like, are they even starters? And they're getting paid, pro ball level money. It's crazy. The salary cap goes up, and I get it. The contracts go up, but man, they pay a lot of money went to a lot of guys who are marginal starters in the NFL, right?
yeah, yeah. And I
So
think you have to be wary of that. You have to be cautious about those things. When we all know, we've seen how many times have the Bears won the offseason? How many times the
all the
Bears
time.
are perennial offseason champions? They are like an offseason dynasty team. Of course, it doesn't mean much when it comes to the regular season, but yeah. So you just got to be careful about trying to hope for your team to win the offseason too much. Maybe hope to win the draft more than the offseason. Winning the draft is usually that's usually a good thing. You want to win the draft, you do well. But yeah, so I think that's what it is. But then, obviously we've talked about Hobbs. We've got another one, Aaron Banks. I'm particularly fond of this signing. I really like this. And this is one that kind of the opposite of Hobbs. This was not on my radar at all. And I hadn't
No,
looked deep into the O-line free agents, but this guy was totally over my head. I was like,
me
Aaron
too.
Banks. Okay. And when I saw the number, I was like, good. Wait, what? At first I thought it was like, oh, he's like a backup guy, but they're paying him serious money. So this is somebody they expect to be a starter.
Oh yeah.
So this is very interesting. I thought this signing was very, very telling about maybe what they are doing with the line this next season. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And I was not expecting them to go out and pay big money to a guard. I thought if they signed an offensive lineman, it would be one of those, backup swing tackles like an Andre Dillard who they had last year, or maybe like some of the guys they've had in the past, Rick Wagner, they went out and signed.
Yeah.
Something like that, where you're like, okay, he's your backup, he's your swing guy, gives you some depth.
Good
Cool.
veteran, knows
Right.
some things.
Right. Did not, or if they were going to sign a starter, figured starting center because Josh Myers is going to walk. Didn't expect them to pay a lot of money for Aaron Banks, and we'll see what the true money is. It's not what was reported, it never is. That's the agent putting money out there. But either way, they're paying him. He's your starting left guard. And the initial reports, Tom Silverstein, Elton Jenkins is moving the center, which has long been kind of rumored and talked about. So I just from that point of view, I think they're better on the offensive line. Like I don't love Elton Jenkins at center, but he's an upgrade over Josh Myers. That makes you better. And I think Aaron Banks, he's never probably going to be a Pro Bowl, All Pro kind of guard, but he's a solid starting NFL guard. Like he's a good player.
He's not a liability.
No, and again, he's coming off his first contract. He's in the prime of his career. He's big, gives you another big guard. Sean Ryan's big, but he's even bigger than Sean Ryan, and he can move well, especially for his size. So I think their run defense got a lot better, especially inside. And yeah, I think they're a better offensive line with swapping out, Myers for now Aaron Banks, even though, it's not a direct comparison because one's a guard, the other one's a center, but I think they improved. And one of the things that you and I both talked about coming out of the playoff loss against the Eagles was like, you got to build your trenches. You got to be better there. Because we saw when Elton Jenkins got hurt against Philadelphia and they had to bring in Glover and Kadeem Telford. Offensive line
went downhill fast.
Yeah, they got killed. And it wasn't just left guard. There were plenty of guys who had tough games on the offensive line that week. But you got to have that depth. You got to always build. You have a franchise quarterback, protect them. But football is still won along the line of scrimmage. So if you can build up we've talked plenty about edge rushers and defensive tackles and building up the defensive line. You got to build up the offensive line too. And that's what this move is. And I'm not going to sit here and complain. It's definitely surprising, and it's not what I think Packers fans expected. I think we all expected a pass rusher and a cornerback, and we got a cornerback and a guard on day one. That's fine. Like you're making your offensive line better, which should make your entire offense better, including your quarterback. But it should definitely beef up the running game. And I think as good as Josh Jacobs was last year, there were plenty of times where the run blocking wasn't good enough. He was making a lot of yards on his own. He was getting hit in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage a little too much for as good as he was last year. So if there can be improvement in the running game, and that makes Josh Jacobs even more dangerous, look out,
No kidding.
And I guess, the other big thing about this is now everybody's, well, where's Jordan Morgan going to play? He might be your right guard. He might be in competition with Sean Ryan. He might be kind of your sixth offensive lineman that swings between positions. But I think long term, he's probably going to end up as their left tackle, because at the end of 2025, Rasheed Walker, Zach Tom, Sean Ryan, all their contracts are due. You ain't going to pay them all with what you just gave Banks, what Elton Jenkins is making. So I think we can all agree, like, Zach Tom's the priority now on the offensive line. Lock him up. And I don't think you're probably going to be able to keep Walker. I mean, look at some of the contracts that were given out to offensive linemen today. Like, Walker's going to get paid. So and I like Walker. I'm not in a hurry to replace him. But looking down the line, if you're going to have a first-round pick on his rookie contract, it might make sense to eventually, not saying in 2025, but eventually, you got to make a tough decision, and you're going to commit to Zach Tom and let Rasheed Walker leave, and you got Jordan Morgan there.
Well, and I think more than having a specific master plan, what they're doing a good job of is just kind of hedging their bets, right? And saying, look, we're going to put so many pieces on the board here, and maybe they make the decision for themselves, right? One of them doesn't play well. Somebody gets hurt, Bakhtiari, God forbid. But,
right.
Stuff like that happens, right? Sometimes the situation sorts itself out and you don't have to make tough decisions about things, but you've hedged your bet, so you've at least got enough options to go with. And I think that's what they're trying to do here. They always harp on best five. Well, we know that Jordan Morgan can move around. He's not just, set to play right guard. And if he can't play right guard, that must mean he's terrible and he's done and all of that. So, I don't have those concerns. I don't think the team has those concerns. The guy got hurt. I think he played some good ball before he got hurt. I think he's going to bounce back. It doesn't seem like there's any concerns about his injuries being lasting. So I just look forward to seeing where does he develop next, right? I think a lot of these guys are going to get chances through mini camp and all of that to rotate in. You're going to find your best center. Maybe Elton Jenkins does take over at center because he's just the best guy for it. Who knows how this thing will sort itself out. We don't know if Aaron Banks can play center. I don't know. I haven't looked into that. But we found out last season that Sean Ryan's not a terrible center. He had a few good center reps. So I look at it like, how many pieces are they going to throw into this puzzle? And again, back to Gute's, his trends. When he invests in free agents, he invests in draft picks at those positions, or he at least prioritizes it. So I wouldn't be surprised to see an interior offensive lineman or two or three come off the board for him throughout the draft. And now you've got a lot of really capable bodies contending for that top five position, which you guarantee yourself is you get a pretty damn good top five. Or best five, I guess we'll call it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think they're deeper today, right now. Like,
absolutely,
they have 6 right now, at least, that they can count on. And I think, just look at last offseason through training camp. They had to sign Andre Dillard, who was a retread. Really didn't have a good camp, but he kind of made the team just out of default because they didn't really have anybody else.
He raised the floor.
Yeah, but I think, like, he struggled, and there was a lot of concern. Like, all right, if somebody goes down, like, Andre Dillard's going to step in, or Telford, or like
it just didn't look good.
It didn't look good,
and it wasn't.
It wasn't. But they got incredibly lucky. Josh Myers was the only starter who missed the game last year. Missed one game. Other than that, everybody played. And then obviously we saw what happened when Jenkins got hurt in the playoff game. But they were incredibly lucky. But they, as we saw, they weren't deep on the offensive line. And you're not going to continue to get that lucky on the offensive line. That's a position where injuries always happen. So, yeah, I mean, I think Banks raises I think they're, like I said, I think they're a better offensive line right now, just having him there, Elton Jenkins at center, and Josh Myers out. But I think it also helps improve their depth with guys like Jordan Morgan. If they can develop Jacob Monk, if they can develop Telford and Glover, and then to your point, they're probably going to draft at least one offensive lineman. They usually do. Probably a third day guy, but we see how successful they are with third day guys. So, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing them take another tackle that they can develop down the line. But I think they're better on the offensive line, and I'm fine with that. I have no complaints.
Yeah, it's hard to be mad about that. Like you're saying, the last few guys that they brought in have really been, they weren't really upside starters. We looked at most of those guys like if you're starting, something probably went wrong. No, but if we look a little bit at what Banks did last season, he only allowed 1 sack, only allowed 4 hits, total of 25 pressures, which is probably not great, but not horrible. 5 penalties. The guys, like we're saying, he's just not a liability. You put him in there, he's not going to make a ton of mistakes. So yeah, I like it. I like the signing. I think, like you said, they're deeper. He definitely is in that contention for best 5 and should push some of these guys. And competition breeds success. He comes in here, pushes them. He's going to make some of these guys better. But yeah, most of all, guys, remember the guys, the positions that Gute prioritizes in free agency, he prioritizes in the draft. So we should see. I would be disappointed if we saw any less than 3 offensive linemen come out of this draft. I'd like to see at least 3.
That's a lot. That's a lot for the way they're up. But
to your point,
it could be.
There's a few guys they're up next season, and you're not signing all of them.
Right. And that's, playing for the future. That's part of the draft that everybody kind of loses focus of because we want immediate success. But yeah, that's one of the positions you look for. That goes back to Ted Thompson used to do that all the time. Was like you didn't look at their needs right then. You looked at whose contract was up the next year, and that's where he would draft, start preparing for the future. So
develop in those holes.
Yeah, that's one. I think the only surprise for me so far, and we're only 1 day into free agency, was they didn't add an edge rusher yet. So we'll see. And we talked about Trey Hendrickson at the top, but that was one where I was a little disappointed to not see that. But as far as Banks goes and Nate Hobbs, I think they're solid additions. I think they make a lot of sense. I think it'll be interesting with the running game because they have switched from that zone scheme that LaFleur was known for and they had run to more of a power scheme. And I think Banks can do both because he did both in San Francisco. He moves pretty well for a big guy, 325, but I think their run games should be much better.
Yeah.
I like it. And, hopefully Elton Jenkins is happy and comfortable at center. I don't know why he wouldn't be, but sometimes position changes can throw guys off and they don't like it. But I would I'd hope he's okay with moving in the center, inside to center. But I think they're a better offensive line today than they were before free agency started. So totally agree. I like it a lot.
Absolutely. So we both give a nice thumbs up on the Aaron Banks signing. Happy about that. I'm happy about the activity. I'm happy about the non-moves. I think there's been a little bit of a poo-poo attitude about not getting DK Metcalf. And, if you listen to what Gute said at his end-of-season press conference, he talked about those guys that command high targets, your Justin Jeffersons, your Jamar Chases, your DK Metcalfs, those types of guys. If you're paying a guy $30 million a year, you got to target him. You got to get him involved. Those teams that rely on those guys don't go deep in the playoffs. And he's not wrong. He's just not wrong, and yes, there's some good receivers on the Eagles, but they're not the high target guys like he's talking about, and AJ Brown's good, but he's not the reason they're there. He's just a piece of the puzzle, and he's good at understanding that, which is probably even more valuable. But yeah, so I think that was a great non-move on DK. Way too rich. I think that was probably always the case. I don't know that Gute would ever have considered paying a receiver that much. But yeah, I mean, we look at all these things, and a lot of the best moves that Gute has had over his last few years were non-moves, right? Like the non-move with Khalil Mack, the non-move with Chase Claypool. A lot of non-moves were really on the winning end. So I'm okay with what he didn't do. I like the moves he did make. I think they still have flexibility to go do things if they need to, want to. But honestly, what we're talking about here, I think the draft has a lot to offer, as far as even quality edge rushers. They may not be the top of the draft stars like your guy out of Penn State, but, there's some good quality edge rushers out there. They're just, I think they're going to be available when the Packers are on the clock. I think the Packers expect that to be the case as well. And I think the same thing is going to be said about those big bodies on the interior D line. You're going to be able to get those guys all the way through the draft. So, there's a lot of opportunity to feel confident that you're going to add to those positions without having to feel pressure to go overpaying them in free agency, which I don't think they overpaid either of those guys. Maybe, I think somebody said, maybe it was our buddy Daryl said that Banks is overpaid. I don't know. I think that's just kind of the going rate these days. And again, after watching Philly's D line, you better invest in that O line.
Yeah, I have no problem with it. And salary cap is going up every year. It takes big jumps every year, so like you got to adjust for that.
Yeah,
and this is what guys are getting paid. I don't think they overpaid, and we really don't know the true like the money that gets reported initially is coming from the agents, so they can pump themselves up to potential other clients. Like the real contracts, once they come out later in the week, we'll see what it really is from Green Bay. It won't be as much as the initial reports. So don't worry about the contracts. Don't worry about the money. That's not truly what Banks and Hobbs are going to make. But I don't have a problem with that. There are a lot of corners that signed big deals.
Numbers.
Yeah, there are a lot of cornerbacks that signed big deals. There are a lot of offensive linemen that signed big deals. The cap goes up, and once you get the free agency, everybody's overpaid at that point because it's open market and the money's flying around. So I'm not worried about that. But yeah, going back to the DK thing, I think I'm pretty much in agreement with you. I never expected it to happen. I thought it was somewhat of a possibility, but I thought it was really small chance. A second round pick, and then you're going to turn around and pay him like $33 million a year.
It's a lot to give up for a guy that is, again, show me the receiver that was the final piece for a Super Bowl puzzle. It's not out there.
He's a good receiver. He's not great.
He's a good receiver, but he's not your Super Bowl piece.
If that was Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or CeeDee Lamb, sure, I would do that deal in a second. But DK Metcalf he's good, but he's inconsistent, and you're still kind of waiting for like that big breakout year from him. And is he ever going to have it at this point in his career? This is now his third contract, so he's 28-ish, I think, 27, 28. Not that he's old, but like he kind of is what he is at this point. Again, he would have been fun in Green Bay with his speed and his size. He definitely would have been able to do a lot of what Christian Watson does, with Watson being out for at least half the season. So yeah, it would have been fun. It would have been a pretty good fit, I think, but that's a little rich. And I'm sure the Packers, I know there's been some reports, well, they didn't make an offer. I'm sure they made some kind of offer or knew what it was going to take. Pittsburgh's ahead of them in the second round, so they couldn't beat a second round pick. They weren't, and there's no way you would offer a first round pick for him. So did the Packers offer a 4 or 3? Was it a pick and a player? We don't know. Maybe someday it'll come out. But what people I think lose sight of sometimes is you're not just giving up the draft pick or player for another player. You got to pay him. It's the contract too. And I think that's maybe more so than what the compensation would have been, is where the Packers were kind of went, you know what, that's too rich for us. It's too much. We're not going, because if you make a trade for Metcalf, forget about, going out and getting a big time pass rusher, or maybe forget about some other things you would want to do. So I think, you got to have your walking away point. And I think at some point probably hit that for Gute, and I'm fine with it. Yes, he would have been fun in Green Bay, but for the price the Steelers paid, I'm good with them saying no to that.
Yeah, it's just it's too rich. He would be a fun piece, but you can't pay a piece that much. That's too much.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going back and forth in the chat about needing to add to the receiver room and fair points being made as far as Watson being out for the first part of the season. I do think that you're going to have a good opportunity in the draft to take, some talented, fun pieces for development, maybe even more so than you had last year. There were some good pieces last year, especially at the top. And then after that, you didn't have a whole lot of big, fast guys, where there's some big, fast guys in this thing that you might have a shot at on day 2, day 3. Pieces that you can get in there maybe are a little bit more developmental, but ready to be a piece of the puzzle instead of a featured guy. So I think there's definitely, we'll get into it. Today's not the day we're doing the draft talk for the receivers. We're getting into quarterbacks and running backs, which we will hop into here in just a minute. But I do think that the draft has some good options at receiver, and as far as needing a veteran presence, I agree with that. That was my biggest case for Devontae, was actually being more of a coach than a receiver. And he's obviously still a very good receiver. Let's not get that twisted. Right. But yeah, I mean, I want that. I want to see that guy who these guys, look up to some extent, who can learn from. And I think that the market's been pretty picked over. One guy that I like, and I don't know that this is the guy, but he might be a decent one, is Amari Cooper. Has he been picked up by anybody yet?
Not yet, no.
He's been a pretty good journeyman, and he's at that 30 mark, so he might be outside the zone of what they'd even consider. But he's one that I think he's got a lot of respect from around the league for how smart he is. And I'd love to see a guy like that that's got good work ethic. He's got good football IQ, get in there and rub off on the young guys. He's as a Bama guy, he played for Saban. Those are good guys to get into your locker room and in your film room. So that's kind of what I would be looking for. But the list of vets here, I mean, MVS I know is a popular one that's out there. I don't know how much of these guys learning from him. He's got rings, so that commands respect for sure. I don't know. Brandon Cooks, another one kind of in that same mold as Amari Cooper as far as an intelligent journeyman. But I don't know. What do you think? If you could, who's your guy that's still available?
I don't really have one. I think it's all picked up. I thought it was a really poor free agent class of receivers anyway.
I agree.
And at this point, I mean, unless they're, what I could see them maybe doing is going out there and getting a speed guy that can stretch the field for him.
MVS makes sense.
MVS, there's a dude from Tennessee. What is it? Westbrook Akine maybe can do that. But other than that, it's really picked over. I think they're going to hit it in the draft. Expect a second round receiver again. I think that's where they're going to go. Maybe there's somebody that shakes loose, between now and the draft or after the draft, a veteran that they go after to try to add. But yeah, at this point, it's really hard to find one. I don't see. I mean, I used to really like Cooper, but he didn't look so good in Buffalo, and maybe that was just the in-season trade messed him up. I know he had an injury, but he kind of looked washed. But yeah. In the past, I would have jumped all over that, but I don't know at this point. So I think they're going to look for, like I said, the draft, and they're going to hope all their guys improve internally, which could happen. But, I'm kind of in that camp. Like, they need somebody else. They need a veteran to kind of be the guy in there. And that person's not available right now.
Yeah, I don't feel like he is either. I think there might be a few guys out there on rosters that teams aren't sure if they can retain them, so they might be willing to move while they can get something for them. I don't have anybody specific in mind, but there's always a crop of guys like that. Again, we'll get another episode where we're a little bit more zoomed in on the receivers and what's available in the draft class, and maybe remaining in the just the veteran target market, we'll call it. But for now, that's not what we're on today. Today in our draft prospect preview, we got QBs and running backs. The reason we're starting with this group is it's probably lower priority for the Packers. So we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about these guys and doing a lot of film and all that kind of study on them. Because I don't think you're going to see high draft picks on either of these positions. They certainly, I think, will add a quarterback. I think that they've committed themselves to that, it sounds like, but it would be shocking before day 3. Running back, you might see one on day 2. There might be some day 2 running back value to be had, but we can talk quarterbacks first. It's an interesting quarterback class, isn't it, man? I can't think of one that this compares to.
Interesting. You say interesting. I'll say it's just not that good.
Uninteresting, maybe.
Yeah, it's not good. Whether there's 6 quarterbacks that went in the first round last year, any of these guys would you take over at those 6?
Maybe Cam Ward. I think there's a case for Cam Ward.
Okay.
I do think he's the real deal. But not over a Jaden Daniels, not over a Caleb Williams, not over
Drake May.
Yeah, not over Drake May. Probably not over Bo Nix. No, we know now. I think, there were some scouts that were onto that back then. So, yeah, he's probably behind Bo Nix. So, what, number 5?
Yeah, and that's fair. And I like Cam Ward, too. I think he's the best
he's
one
good.
in this class. Good. And I'm all for a bunch of quarterbacks going in the first round, especially within the first 22 picks, because that drives better players down to the Packers. But, yeah, I don't think it's very good. I like Cam Ward, but there's some issues there. He gets a little loose with the ball, and he'll throw some turnovers there. But he's an exciting prospect, too. And then Deion's kid, Shador, there's some things you like. He plays on time. I think he knows how to run an offense, but he just doesn't have any of those traits that are special. Like, he doesn't have the big time arm. He doesn't have big size. He's not a great athlete. Like, he's just okay. He can do some things, but like, I don't know how much room there is to grow in his game. And I don't see. I think his upside, his ceiling is kind of limited. And then after that, she's like pick your guy with some issues. Pick your guy with problems. It's not a very good draft for quarterbacks. From the Packers' perspective, be glad they don't need one. But I could definitely see them taking one late on day 3, like they have the last couple of years with Michael Pratt and Sean Clifford. Obviously, Pratt didn't work out. Clifford's still around, but you have Malik Willis, and I'm perfectly fine with him as the number 2. But he's going into the last year of his contract, so eventually you're going to need to develop another backup. And I know Gute has said in the past, like, they want to get back into that where they take these guys and develop them. I don't think they should be shy about it, even though Michael Pratt didn't work out. It was a 7th-round pick. What are you going to do? It happens.
Yeah, you got to take those shots. They're not supposed to work out all the time.
Right. So, yeah, I definitely could see them taking one on day 3. But, just as far as the overall class of quarterbacks, it's not impressive. It's not that good. And it's a down year at the quarterback position for sure.
Well, I do disagree with you a little bit. It is a down year. I agree with that. I think that there are 2 guys that are being overlooked. Funny enough, have both played for Ohio State.
I was wondering if you're going to go there.
Yeah.
I do
so,
like the board.
And I wasn't going to do a whole lot of homework on the QBs, and a friend of mine asked to do a little bit of a segment with him talking about QBs. So I wanted to polish up and know what I was talking about. And I started looking at him, and to me, Cam Ward is what they say he is. I think he's good. I think he's the best in this class. I think that when he makes mistakes, they can be bad mistakes. There's a few of those. But man, when he's on, he's on. He zips that ball out of his hand. He puts the ball where he wants. He seems very comfortable navigating the pocket. I think if there's anything that would be a knock on him, it's that he tries to hang on to the play too long. He'll be a lot like Aaron Rodgers, where he'll take sacks where you'd much rather him throw the ball away. And that could end up being frustrating if he goes to the wrong team with a bad offensive line. That can also be coached out. that's not a huge thing. Although maybe Aaron Rodgers disagrees. So
Yeah.
you just had to live with that with him. And the upside of that, though, is he gives you some pretty spectacular plays when he extends those plays. So yeah, I think Cam Ward's the real deal, number one in this class. Is he a franchise QB worthy of the number overall pick? Man, I'm glad that it's not my job to determine that, because I don't know about all that. I just, in this class, you look at him. I mean, he looks like a good dude. He looks like his flaws are minimal. We'll just put it at that. The next quarterback that I have on my list, and I am no quarterback expert or guru, and I am certainly not trying to get attention for this take, but guys, this is just what my eyes told me, okay, is Will Howard. I think Will Howard is the second best quarterback in this draft. And I think that we just got a lot of media not being honest with us right now. And I don't understand why. I can't say I understand why. But this has happened in the past where, a guy's a guy and you just sort of overlook him for some reason. I mean, there's a reason that Pat Mahomes didn't go first overall. They didn't know Pat Mahomes was going to be what he was or what he is. If they did, I guarantee he'd have gone first overall. So I feel like Will Howard's being slept on a little bit. He's got the size, 6'4", 235. He threw for 4,000 yards this season, 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 72, almost 73% completion rating, which is pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. Cam Ward has 67%. So, I mean, he's significantly better there. He won a national title on probably the hardest track to get there in the history of college football. I mean, I went back and I looked at it. I was like, their loss to Michigan was such a black eye on what was otherwise a just remarkable streak. And if any of you are Ohio State fans, this isn't news to you guys. You're probably sitting there going, thank you. Finally, somebody's talking about this. But I went back and I looked at this. I mean, and it was before the playoffs even. It was like, hang on, I got to get this right, because the streak is just incredible. And the mental toughness that it takes to navigate that as a quarterback is not something to be overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, they had lost to Oregon, I think, in like October, and then they had the Michigan loss, and then made the run from there through the national championship.
Yeah, so here we go. I got it pulled up. All right, so okay, they reversed it on me there. They're going from top down. So let's see here. From October 12th, you've got number 3 Oregon. You lost by a point there. Then you got Nebraska. Then you got number 3 Penn State. Then you got Purdue and Northwestern. Then you got number 5 Indiana. So there's 3 top 5 matchups from October 12th to November 23rd. Then you got Michigan. And then you got number 9 Tennessee, number 1 Oregon for the second time, which, I mean, that in itself is an excellent win. Number 5 Texas, number 7 Notre Dame to seal the deal and get the natty. And they won those games all decisively. The lowest amount of points they scored was against Michigan. All those other games, they scored 20, 28. 28 points was the lowest amount of points they scored in the playoffs. I mean,
they were loaded on offense.
They were, for sure,
loaded on offense.
For sure. No doubt about it. But, you could say that about other teams that didn't accomplish that. So I'm just very interested in Will Howard. And I went and looked at the tape. The one knock that I have, and I don't hear a lot of other people claim like there's this thing that he does that it won't work. Usually that's the case. Usually there's something we're like, yeah, he's good, but, and I just haven't really heard that consistently. For me, his release is slow. He's got a slower release. I think that can be fixed. It's not like the Tim Tebow windup where you got to use an hourglass to measure it. But yeah, he's got a slow release, but he's still, you don't have to have the best arm talent to be a good quarterback in the NFL. For me, it's about decision-making, and it's about being able to actually run an offense. And man, Will Howard has to have proved that how many times over through that schedule. And again, yes, they're loaded, but he did it. He ran it. You know, they were loaded last year with Kyle McCord, and it didn't happen. So that's where I think Will Howard's being slept on. I think he's the second best quarterback in this draft. And I think Kyle McCord might be the third.
Wow. Look at you with the bold takes.
And I'm not trying to be bold.
No.
I'm not trying to be bold. And I'm not a quarterback expert. I'm a dummy, guys. We're just having fun at, 10:30 at night in Central Time here, 11:30 on the East Coast. You guys are getting late. But yeah, I went back to Kyle McCord's tape at Stanford. I like his arm, man. His arm talent is awesome. He feels like he's in command. You get the feeling he can put the ball wherever he wants. I think the biggest knock on him is that he didn't do well at Ohio State, or maybe as well as you want him to. And that, then you go to to Syracuse, and the competition isn't as high. But man, just watching him just pass the ball and navigate the offense, it's good, man. He's a good quarterback. He can sling a thing. So I liked him. He led the NCAA in passing yards last year with 47, almost 4,800, 34 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. That's a good decision touchdown to interception ratio. He's got it. He's got what you want. He's got the tools. To me, can he, what's going on between the ears, right? What are coaches seeing in the meetings? And I'll tell you, here's another little indicator. And a lot of times we get surprised on draft day by where some of these guys end up going. At the Shrine Bowl, he was held out from playing in the game. Now, that's an important thing, because for quarterbacks, that is every snap of competition is super valuable for evaluation. So the scouts and coaches that were there at the Shrine Bowl this year saw enough from Kyle McCord that they said, nope, you're good. Don't play in the game. Now that speaks. That tells you something. They don't need to see anymore. They already know enough about him that they need to make their decisions. It's a very interesting thing. Very interesting thing. So I think he's way better than what he's being evaluated at right now. Jackson Dart is one. He would probably be my next one. And he's good, but that's where I start splitting hairs. It's a toss-up between him and Shadur Sanders at number 4. I'll probably lean Shadur Sanders because of pedigree and just athleticism. He's a better athlete than Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart's battle-tested in the SEC. He's thrown some good yards. He's won some good games. So there's a case to be made for him. I just don't like much after that. I don't like Jalen Milroe as a quarterback. I do not think he will be a quarterback in the NFL, but he might be an all-pro running back. That dude is a hell of an athlete. He will be an NFL player for sure. And if you can put him at running back and, use him as a quarterback here and there, that'll give defenses nightmares. But I don't think that he's being taken as a quarterback early in this draft. If he is taken early in this draft, I think he's going to be spending some reps at running back. But yeah, for me, that's about it. There's not a whole lot else to be excited about. I know Tyler Show's getting some interest and he's all right. I think that these guys, Jackson Dart, Tyler Show, I think these guys are going to end up going down into day 2, day 3. And, those are the types that'll probably be available for the Packers. I think Will Howard, Kyle McCord probably end up going day 2. I think those are guys that teams like the Raiders or the Steelers could get on that day 2 turnaround to start building that quarterback position. But yeah, so that's the way I look at it, guys. I'm a dummy, so if you disagree with me, you're probably right. But just what my eyes tell me about the whole quarterback situation in this draft. But running backs too, Tim. What do you think, man? What are we looking at in this running back class?
Well, so I just want to touch on.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Quarterbacks too quickly.
Yeah, no, I just want to touch on a couple things. I think it's interesting what you're saying, and Kyle McCord's like the one. If he was there on the third day,
he'd be an awesome pickup on the
third
day.
He was really good at Syracuse last season, and it's funny because he was kind of seen as a little bit of a disappointment at Ohio State, not good enough to beat Michigan and to get them to a national championship, which he still was pretty damn good quarterback, and most places would have loved to have had him, but Ohio State was considered disappointing. So he goes to Syracuse, transfers there, has less talent around him. First time head coach, first new coaching staff there, and he lit it up. He had a really good season for Syracuse. So
Yeah,
I'd be interested in diving into him a little bit more, figuring out why didn't it work as well at Ohio State as it did for you at Syracuse, and what the change was. But there's something to work with there with him. The Tyler Show thing. There's some analysts. I know Dane Brugler really likes him. I think Todd McShay was the other one that I think had him in the first round too, something like that.
I think we're overthinking things at that point.
I think so too. He's going to be 25 years old, that's kind of old, especially for a quarterback. You're already, there's not a whole lot of development left, and he's had a ton of injuries. That's why he's 25 years old and still just entering the draft now. I get he has a big arm and he's got good size and all that, but I think first round for him is way too. I think second round's too high for him.
Yeah, he's a day 3 guy for me.
Yeah, I think people got to be careful there. And then beyond that, I don't see a whole lot. I don't like Sanders that much. I think he could be okay with the right team, the right players. I think he's a guy that needs the players around him to boost him up a lot. He's not one of those quarterbacks that can play with just average talent and he's going to make them better and carry him. He needs to be propped up a little bit. I don't think
at least early on, or he needs to go somewhere where he can sit for a year or two. For me, he's like a lesser talented Caleb Williams. He's way too comfortable relying on improvising, and his decision making doesn't look mature to me. Right. He looks like he's out there to kind of play like Michael Vick did, right? Where Michael Vick came back and admitted he's like, I didn't study the playbook. I just went out there and played ball. That's what the vibe that I get from him. He said he knows to say the right things to reporters. You can already tell he's practiced those lines. He repeats them. Listening to his interviews is almost painful, man. It's just all right, stop asking this guy questions. You're not going to get anything different than what you've already heard over and over. And you can tell that he's used to saying it because he doesn't even say it with any kind of, inflection or any kind of genuine or authentic, tone. It sounds like something he's practiced saying over again. So, with him, I'm not sold on Shedeur. I think that there's some people that are hypnotized by him and just think that he's going to be awesome and it's Deion's son. And that's great. I'm not here to cheer against that. I don't see it. And I think that once you get to the NFL, that you can't hide anymore. You can hide in college, right? Johnny Manziel did a great job hiding in college. He balled out. He beat Nick Saban drunk. All right. You can beat Nick Saban drunk in college. You can't do that shit in the NFL.
No,
it's not even close.
It's not going to happen. And I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of Sanders, but if he goes to the right team, I think he's got a chance to at least develop into a solid starting quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to be, a top 5 kind of guy or anything like that. But I think, right environment, right coaching, he might be able to
develop. Yeah. Right influences around him.
But it's overall, it's a real disappointing quarterback class, or just a scary one if you need a quarterback. Thankfully, the Packers don't.
Exactly.
But man, for those teams that do, I don't even know what you like. If you're the Raiders, well, the Raiders got Geno Smith, so I guess they're okay for now. But some of these teams that the Giants, you're going to go sign retread quarterback, and then what? What's your long-term plan? And it's almost I don't know, get through a year and hope that next year's draft is a lot better, because there's not these franchise.
They've already got eyes on it. They know what they're looking at next year. And I think that's why that's what happens is you have certain moves made this offseason because what you can see next offseason, and so
possibly. But it's there's not a whole lot at quarterback for me in this draft. There's nothing really that excites me. Whereas a Packers fan, man, I don't want to see him, getting drafted by an NFC team. Nobody scares me as a Packers fan.
No, so. I think what could be exciting is again, if those guys are just being slept on, even by the teams, like a Will Howard or a Kyle McCord falling to the Packers on day 3, if you can get one of those guys on day 3 and hang out behind Jordan Love, that's a good thing. That's definitely a good thing, in my opinion. I don't think that'll happen. I think those guys are going to be out of there on day 2 at the latest. But yeah, so that's the quarterback class, right? Like that's what we're looking at here. We've got running backs. We could probably save running backs for next week. What do you think?
Yeah, that's good. We'll tackle the
We
running
can
backs
save
next week.
running backs for next week. It is a deep running back class. It's worth talking about.
Yes.
I don't think the Packers have a high priority on running back in this draft at this point. So, that's why we're not going to put a ton of energy into it. But we'll get into that next week. Maybe running backs and tight ends. That's probably a fair combination.
Yeah, sounds good.
Running backs and tight ends, and there's some tight end chatter happening in the chat right now. Some good observations by you guys, but I do think some of you are wrong. I think Fannin Jr. might be a worthwhile investment for us to talk about next week. But anyway, yeah, we will get into it. We've already got a nice fast start here in free agency. Packers adding a couple guys. I think good value, good ads, good depth, good upside, all the above. Plenty of opportunities still in the draft to address the things that need to be addressed. And we are going to dive into all of those in the coming weeks. But fear not, Packers fans. Gute is on the move. This guy is doing stuff. Sometimes his non-moves are his best moves. So just in Gute we trust, right? So we're going to keep on keeping on with that. But we appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with us this week and every week on the Packers Weekly Podcast. If y'all had fun with this episode, enjoy this episode, please spike that like button for us. Jump over to YouTube and hit the subscribe button on that Packers Talk YouTube channel. We would greatly appreciate that. Love having you guys in the comments. We get some great stuff. You guys are some knowledgeable Packers fans out there in the comments. Yes, Matthew, we'll give you a shout out on your birthday, man, but it's not your birthday yet, so just hang in there. But most importantly, we will see y'all next week, 9:30 p.m. Monday night. And of course, go Pack, go.